Blackwater Bay. Fog never lifts in Blackwater Bay. It just breathes, rolling in and out like the tide, carrying the smell of rust and old bait. Ethan Park pressed his forehead to the van window as they crossed the weather-cracked bridge into town. The water below looked like steel sludge, dotted with rotting pylons that jutted up like broken teeth. "Charming," he muttered. His father, behind the wheel, laughed once. "It's authentic, son. That's the point." His mother pointed toward a crooked sign at the roadside. "Welcome to Blackwater Bay, POP 327, home of the best lobster roll in Maine." Someone had crossed out best and scrawled last in red spray paint. They rolled past the dock front, shuttered bait shops, peeling murals of mermaids, a rusted swing set buried in dune grass. A gull limped across the road, dragging one wing, then vanished into the mist. The Airbnb was a sagging cabin a mile inland, hidden among black-barked pines. The listing had promised rustic charm and ocean whispers. In reality, the only whisper was the sound of damp boards complaining under their feet. Ethan unpacked his drone case on the kitchen table while his mom fussed with the thermostat. "You sure you don't want to wait till morning?" she asked. "That fog looks thick." "That's exactly why I want to fly now," he said. Thermal differences. Fog layers reflect infrared light differently at dusk. His father grinned. Spoken like a true scientist. By 7 p.m., Ethan was on the dock, backpack strapped tight, his GoPro blinking red. The ocean was flat, unnervingly flat, like a mirror coated in ash. Out past the pier, a single boat bobbed, its deck light a dull ember. That's when he first met Jack Callahan. Jack's silhouette emerged from the haze like a statue someone forgot to finish carving. Heavy coat, salt-bleached beard, right sleeve pinned and folded. His left hand held a coffee mug, his right arm ended in a gleaming steel hook. "You the Parks," he rasped, voice like gravel under tide. "Ghost tour leaves in 5. Mrs. Park blinked. "Ghost tour? Oh. Yes, I booked that. On Trip Local." Jack nodded, stepping aboard his weathered lobster boat. The name Mary's Lament was carved in chipped blue letters. Ethan climbed on last, his camera already running. Jack noticed. "You filming for the college?" "Yeah. I'm studying acoustic anomalies in coastal environments." Jack smirked. "Fancy way to say you don't believe in ghost stories." The old engine coughed to life, pushing them out into the gray. The harbor lights shrank behind them until they looked like eyes closing. Out on open water, Jack started talking. Not the rehearsed tourist bait chatter Ethan expected, but a voice half lost between folklore and confession. "See that ridge out there? Locals call it Devil's Teeth. Used to be a quarry before the sea took it back. Some nights you'll hear music, like a choir underwater. That's when you wear these." He handed Ethan a pair of industrial noise-canceling headphones, battered and taped. Mrs. Park laughed nervously. "Is this part of the experience?" "Part of surviving," Jack said flatly. The wind picked up. Fog thickened into walls, and the temperature dropped so fast that Ethan's breath turned white. He adjusted the GoPro. "What about those lights you mentioned online? The ghost lanterns?" Jack didn't answer. He throttled down the engine, letting the boat drift. Then he pointed overboard. At first Ethan thought it was reflection, blue streaks wavering beneath the surface. Then one of them moved against the current. Another spiraled upward, pulsing like a jellyfish but far brighter. "Bioluminescent algae," Ethan said automatically, though his voice trembled. Dinoflagellates, maybe. Jack's hook clenched around the railing. No algae swims upstream. The lights gathered, forming a slow-turning spiral. For one heartbeat, Ethan swore he saw a face there, pale, wide-eyed, hair floating like kelp. He blinked, and it was gone. Jack slammed the throttle. The engine screamed. "We're done. Tour's over." "Wait. I need another." No pictures. Not of them. The ride back was silent except for the gulls crying in the dark. When they docked, Jack killed the engine and stared out at the fog-swallowed horizon. "They show up when the bay wants something," he said quietly. "Don't ask what." Ethan tried to laugh it off, but something about the man's tone lodged deep under his skin. He packed up his gear without another word. As they left, Mrs. Park whispered to her husband, "He seems off." "Local color," Mr. Park said. "Makes the stories real." Ethan wasn't listening. He was checking his GoPro. The last 10 seconds of footage were static, except for one frame, half corrupted, showing a shape behind the boat. Not a fish. Not light. Something reaching. That night, the fog pressed against the cabin windows like wet cloth. Ethan sat on the porch with his laptop, scrubbing through the corrupted video frame by frame. Every time he tried to export it, the program crashed. From the trees came a faint hum, low, mechanical, rhythmic. He thought it might be a generator, until it changed pitch like, singing. "Dad. You hear that?" But inside, the TV was blaring. His parents were arguing about cell reception. Ethan stepped off the porch. The fog swallowed him whole. The sound came clearer now, voices, layered, female, singing in a language he didn't know. It seemed to rise from the direction of the coast. He lifted his phone for GPS, but the compass spun wildly. North became east, then west, then nothing. A sudden crunch behind him, just a pine cone, he told himself. Still, he turned back toward the cabin. Through the mist he saw a light. Not from the house, higher, sweeping across the treetops. A rotating beam, faint but steady. The lighthouse. Blackwater Light hadn't worked in 50 years, according to every record he'd read. Yet there it was, turning slow and sure, its beam slicing the fog like a knife. Ethan raised his camera. The light passed over him, and for a split second, his phone screen flashed a reflection, himself standing ankle-deep in seawater, though he was miles from the coast. The beam swept away. His phone screen went black. Morning came brittle and gray. Mrs. Park complained about the heater again. Mr. Park was already packing fishing rods. Ethan barely touched breakfast. "I'm going back to the dock," he said. "Need to talk to that captain." "Jack," his mother frowned. "Maybe give him a day, honey." He seemed intense. But Ethan was already out the door. The docks were empty except for gulls and the sound of ropes creaking against wood. Mary's Lament was there, but so was another boat, a smaller one, cluttered with traps and nets. An old man sat on the bow, wearing orange-ear defenders and staring at the sea. "Morning," Ethan said. The men didn't react. Ethan tapped his shoulder. Old Man Pike looked up, his eyes pale and watery. He slid off one earmuff. "Don't do that, boy. You'll hear them." "Hear who?" He pointed to the horizon. "Widows. They hum in the static. That's how they get in your head." Ethan tried to smile. "You mean the singers?" At Devil's Teeth. Pike squinted. You already heard then. Best forget it. I recorded something. Maybe you can tell me what language. Language. Pike barked a laugh that turned into a cough. Ain't language. It's direction. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? The old man leaned closer, voice barely a whisper. They sing where the dead drift. And if you answer back, the tide don't stop till it takes what it wants. Before Ethan could respond, Jack appeared from behind a stack of traps. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. Go home, kid, he said. You've seen enough. Ethan held out his GoPro. I need you to look at this. Tell me if you've seen it before. Jack hesitated, then took the device. He scrolled to the corrupted frame and froze. The hook at the end of his arm tapped the screen once. That was taken where? Near Devil's Teeth. Last night. Jack's jaw tightened. Then don't go back. Not even close. You hear me? I'm writing a thesis. I have to. Then write about something else. Write about how curiosity smells when it drowns. He tossed the GoPro back. It landed hard against Ethan's chest. Next fog, stay on land, Jack said, turning away. And if you hear them singing again, put something loud in your ears. That afternoon, the fog rolled in earlier than usual. By sunset, the ocean was gone, replaced by a solid wall of gray. Ethan sat in his room, the GoPro on his lap, replaying the corrupted clip. He slowed it down to half speed. Behind the shimmer of blue light, he saw movement, a dozen faint figures, hair drifting upward like seaweed, mouths open in silent hymns. Then, faintly, from the laptop speakers, bring us a hand that still steers. He tore the headphones off. Outside, the lighthouse beam swept once across the forest. It was 11:11 p.m. And from far below, through miles of fog and water, came the sound of a single metal hook tapping the side of a boat. Clink. 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 Morning returned dull and colorless, as if the town had been scrubbed of contrast overnight. The fog didn't burn away, it only thinned enough to show silhouettes, the warped dock, the bait shack, the distant line of pines leaning inland like they wanted to escape. Ethan hadn't slept. His laptop battery had died around 3 a.m., but the whisper in the speaker still looped inside his skull, bring us a hand that still steers. He told himself it was pareidolia, his mind finding meaning in distortion. Still, when he looked at his own hands, he flexed them like checking they were still his. By noon, he was back on the pier, determined to turn fear into data. Jack's boat wasn't there. Only Old Man Pike, sorting through coils of rope with the patience of a spider. The old man's ear defenders were hanging around his neck this time, the radio beside him crackled with static. Ethan walked up, trying to sound casual. You ever seen the lighthouse working? Pike spat into the water. Not since the year they found those bodies in the drain pipes. Why? I saw it last night. The old man froze. Then he slowly reached for the radio and turned the volume up, static hissing like waves breaking. Then you don't talk about it. Not to me, not to anyone. Some lights ain't for seeing. Ethan felt a small thrill. Fear wrapped inside fascination. Can I rent a kayak from you? Hell no. I'll pay double. Kid, Pike said, voice gravel dry, double money don't buy back what you lose out there. But Ethan already saw the half-deflated red kayak tied to the piling. One rope, one clasp. Easy. That night he waited until the cabin lights went out and his parents' voices faded. He packed quietly, GoPro on chest mount, waterproof recorder, headlamp, thermos of coffee. The fog outside was so thick it looked solid. At the shoreline, the kayak rocked impatiently. Ethan slipped it free, paddling toward where his GPS marked the underwater speakers at Devil's Teeth. The bay was unnaturally still. No waves, no current, like the sea was holding its breath. Halfway there, his drone buzzed to life from the backpack, set to auto-hover and record. The faint red light blinked overhead, a lonely star in the white void. He spoke into the mic for his research log. July 9th, 3:04 a.m., approaching coordinates of submerged transmitter. Testing hypothesis, localized acoustic interference, possibly caused by pressure shifts or... The rest of the sentence drowned beneath a low hum, deep enough to vibrate his ribs. He looked up. The fog was glowing faint blue. At first, he thought it was moonlight, but there was no moon. Then the glow split into 3 moving orbs below the surface, circling him like curious predators. Ghost lanterns, he whispered. He dipped the hydrophone into the water. Immediately, a melody bloomed in his headphones, female voices, harmonized and distant, yet so clear it felt like they were singing inside his chest. The language had consonants that clicked softly, vowels stretched like waves. Ethan's rational mind scrambled for explanations, whale calls. Radio leakage, but the rhythm didn't match any known pattern. It was structured, deliberate. He turned the recorder volume up. "This is beautiful," he breathed. Then, faintly, beneath the harmony, another sound joined, a metallic scraping. A dragging chain. No, something biting steel. He aimed his headlamp into the water. The light cut down maybe 3 meters before being swallowed by blue haze. There, something moved. Sleek, fast. The cable attached to his kayak trembled once. Then slackened. Then snapped. The kayak spun slowly, free-floating. He barely had time to process before the water erupted beside him. A pale arm shot up, fingers webbed with black sludge, nails long as hooks. It clutched the edge of the kayak, and Ethan screamed. He paddled wildly, smashing at the hand with the oar. It didn't bleed. It didn't even flinch. Another arm surfaced, then another, reaching, not for him, but for the GoPro strapped to his chest. The voices below shifted pitch, now chanting one phrase in unison. "The hand that steers." Ethan tore the camera free and hurled it into the fog. The singing stopped instantly. Silence crashed over the bay. Then something tugged the kayak backward. Hard. He turned and saw the pale hands gripping the tethered rope he hadn't noticed, the one still attached to the anchor line trailing behind him. He slashed it with the paddle. The rope parted. The hands vanished beneath the surface, leaving only widening ripples and the faint scent of salt and iron. When dawn broke, Pike found the kayak washed against the rocks near the pier. No sign of Ethan. But a few hours later, Jack Callahan received a text. No words, just a thumbnail image, framed from a GoPro. It showed the bow of Mary's Lament, half obscured by fog. And someone waving from the water. Ethan woke coughing seawater. The world around him swayed and groaned like a living thing. He was lying on a tilted deck, barnacle-covered, soaked through. The boat wasn't his. It was ancient, every plank blackened and slick. Nets hung like spider webs. Lanterns, real, not spectral, burned with that same blue fire he'd seen under the waves. He pushed himself up, trembling. Figures stood along the rail, motionless, dressed in fisherman's gear decades old. Their eyes were milk-white, their skin mottled with salt rot. He stumbled backward. None of them moved, until one opened its mouth. A stream of water poured out, carrying a whisper. "Welcome aboard the Eliza Jane." Ethan's pulse hammered. The Eliza Jane was the ship that disappeared in 1987. He ran for the bow, but the deck ended abruptly in mist. There was no sea, no sky, just endless gray. From behind came footsteps. Wet, uneven. He turned. A woman stood there, her face half hidden by tangled hair. Her eyes gleamed like the ghost lanterns. She extended a hand, long, pale, dripping. "You brought the voice," she said softly, her accent heavy, old. "Now bring the hand." I don't understand." Her other hand pointed toward the far side of the ship, where a rusted anchor chain coiled. Something hung from it, a severed arm, swollen and gray, still wearing a digital watch blinking 11:11. Ethan's own watch flashed the same time. The woman smiled. "Balance, little sailor. The tide always evens the scales." He stumbled back, slipped on the wet deck, and hit his head. Darkness. Somewhere far above, the sound of an engine. Jack Callahan throttled Mary's lament toward Devil's Teeth, fog parting in sheets before the bow. His left hand clenched the wheel, the steel hook on his right caught the faint glint of dawn. He'd seen the same light 20 years ago, the night he lost his arm. He never told anyone what really bit it off. The radio crackled. Static, then a voice, Ethan's, thin and warbled, "I see them. They're waving." Jack slammed the throttle. "Hold on, kid." He reached the coordinates and cut the engine. The sea was glass. Then, 20 yards off, something floated. A hand. Young, pale, the wrist torn ragged. The Apple Watch still blinking 11:11. Jack's throat locked. He reached for it with the hook, pulled it close. The speaker mounted near the deck crackled to life, though the system was off. A woman's voice hummed, low and mournful. Not his. Yours. Jack froze. Then the water below began to churn, circles widening, turning black. He felt the pull, deep and cold, tugging at the hull. He looked at his steel hook. The reflection in the chrome wasn't his face, it was hers, the same pale woman from his nightmares, smiling from beneath the surface. Jack swore under his breath, yanked the starter cord of the chainsaw lying beside him, and pressed the spinning blade against his arm just above the elbow. Pain burst white. Blood sprayed the deck. But the sea went still. A shape rose through the fog, Ethan, half submerged, coughing, alive. Jack tied a garrote with the anchor rope, dragged the boy aboard, and collapsed beside him. The chainsaw sputtered out. Somewhere behind them, the ghost ship's lanterns dimmed, one by one, until the water was black again. The last thing Jack heard before he passed out was the whisper of the lighthouse turning one final time. When he woke, sunlight stabbed through the mist. Ethan was breathing beside him, pale but alive. The severed stump of Jack's arm throbbed in rhythm with the waves. He looked out toward where the Eliza Jane had been. Nothing remained, no wreckage, no glow, just the endless gray sea. Then, faintly, something metallic tapped against the hull. Once. Twice. 3 times. Clink. 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 Jack exhaled and whispered to no one, paid in full. Ethan didn't remember the boat ride back. In fact, he didn't remember anything between the cold, an all-consuming, marrow-deep cold, and waking up in a hospital bed that smelled like bleach and seaweed. Someone was speaking near him. Female voice. Not his mother. No hypothermia beyond stage 2. Mild disorientation. Lucky he was found at all. When he blinked awake, the first thing he saw was a ceiling fan spinning too slowly. The second was a police officer standing at the foot of the bed, hands folded over a notebook. "Morning, Mr. Park," the officer said. "Name's Deputy Rogan. You remember what happened out there?" Ethan's throat felt lined with sandpaper. "Out where?" Rogan exchanged a glance with the nurse. "Blackwater Bay. You went out in a kayak night before last. Locals found you and Captain Callahan both unconscious on his vessel. Coast Guard brought you in." Ethan rubbed his temples. A dull ache pulsed behind his eyes. "I don't remember leaving the cabin." "Right." Rogan's pen scratched the notebook. "For the record, Captain Callahan's alive, but barely. Lost another arm." Ethan froze. "Another?" Rogan nodded. "Said something about paying a debt. You know what he meant by that?" Ethan shook his head. The deputy's eyes softened a little. "Kid, whatever stunt you were pulling, count yourself lucky. Blackwater Bay's taken better men than you." By afternoon, Ethan was released under observation. His parents wanted to drive straight back to Boston, but Ethan begged for one night. "I have to thank him," he said. They reluctantly agreed, checking into the town's only motel, the Harbor View, which had no view and smelled faintly of diesel. Ethan walked alone to the docks. The fog was thinner now, more like breath than wall, and the town looked almost normal in daylight. Fishermen mended nets. A gull screeched. Somewhere, a bell buoy clanged. At the far end of the pier sat Mary's Lament. Tarps covered most of her deck. Jack was on the bench beside it, one sleeve bandaged, a flask resting between his knees. He looked up as Ethan approached. "You're supposed to be resting." "I owe you my life." Jack snorted. "Keep it. I've got too many already." For a while, neither spoke. The sea moved lazily against the pilings. Finally Ethan said, "I heard them, Jack." "The Widows. I recorded their song." "It wasn't." Jack cut him off. "Don't finish that sentence." "I can prove it." Ethan pulled out his phone, thumbed open the file. But when he hit play, there was nothing. Just dead air. Jack chuckled bitterly. "They don't like microphones." "Who are they?" Ethan demanded. Jack stared out at the horizon. "Depends who you ask. To some, they're lost wives waitin' for sailors. To others, they're what's left of the sea when it gets tired of bein' ignored. Me, I think they're debt collectors." "Debt for what?" "For curiosity." That evening, while his parents packed the car, Ethan uploaded the surviving drone footage to his laptop. Most of it was fog and water. But frame 327 stopped his breath. A figure stood on the surface of the sea. Female. Translucent. Hands clasped as if praying. And behind her, the faint outline of another ship, one that glowed like burning salt. He exported the clip to a folder, intending to analyze it later. The computer froze halfway through, screen flickering. Then the video played by itself, unstoppable. The image zoomed in, closer and closer to the woman's face. She whispered something. No sound, but the subtitles auto-generated by the software formed words anyway. "Bring us a captain." Ethan slammed the lid shut. The motel lights flickered. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw seawater dripping from the electrical socket. By morning, Jack Callahan was gone. The harbor master said he left before dawn, took the Mary's Lament back out despite the Coast Guard ban. Said he needed to set things right. The only thing found that afternoon was his steel hook, impaled upside down on the boat's mast like an offering. The news spread fast. Within a week, the story hit TikTok under the tag #CaptainHookOfMaine. The short clip of Ethan's corrupted footage leaked somehow, maybe from his cloud backup, maybe not. Millions watched it, the blue lights under the water, the woman's face emerging from the fog, and the final frame, Jack Callahan staring straight into the lens, whispering something no one could fully decipher. Ethan deleted his account the next day. He returned to Boston in silence. Classes resumed. His advisor, Dr. Rosenfeld, asked about the thesis. "You'll still focus on acoustic anomalies?" Ethan hesitated. "Yeah," he said. "Just different ones." But nights were the problem. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back on that deck, the song, the cold, the weightless feeling before the world turned upside down. He started sleeping with noise-canceling headphones, the same model Jack had given him. When he took them off one dawn, the faint hum of the Widows still lingered in the room. 2 weeks later, an email arrived from an unknown sender. Subject line, "The SEA still wants you." Attached was a short video. It opened with static, then a grainy view of Blackwater Bay at night. The camera panned toward the lighthouse. Its beam turned once. Twice. At exactly 11:11 p.m., the light froze mid-rotation, aimed directly at the lens. Then a voice, low and warped, filled the speakers. "The hand that steers has been taken. The heart that listens remains." Ethan slammed the laptop shut again, but the voice kept going, from the speakers, from the walls, from inside his head. He tore the headphones off. The hum returned, rising like the tide. In the mirror above his desk, his reflection smiled half a second late. 3 days later, Dr. Rosenfeld called campus police when Ethan missed class for the 4th time. They found his dorm empty except for a notebook full of equations, sketches of waveforms, and a single phrase scrawled over and over across the last page. They wanted the captain. The same night, tourists at a bar in Portland filmed a strange light far offshore, a lone boat drifting toward the horizon, a figure at the bow wearing a coat too big for him, one sleeve hanging loose. When the footage hit social media, it went viral again under the tag #ReturnOfTheCaptain. The Coast Guard searched the coordinates. They found nothing but a single buoy floating upside down, scratched into its metal side. The sea doesn't take curiosity. It takes collateral. By August, the tourists were gone. The locals said the fog had grown heavier than in years, thicker, wetter, more alive. It clung to skin and hair, seeping into the wood of houses until even the walls smelled like salt. No one played music anymore. The radio stations dissolved into static once you hit the Bay Road. Even the seagulls were silent. Oldman Pike was the first to notice the new sound. He was setting traps near Devil's Teeth when the speakers on his boat, long dead, disconnected, crackled to life. Out came a woman's voice, clear and cold as glass. "All debts return with the tide." The traps trembled in the water. Pike backed the throttle, eyes wide. Beneath him, faint blue light spun like constellations, circling the hull. He shoved the throttle forward. Nothing. The engine just whined. Then the radio screamed, not feedback, not human. A chorus of hundreds, all singing the same phrase, each word layered over the next until it sounded like a seaquake. He grabbed the emergency flare and fired it skyward. The red light cut through the fog for 3 seconds before vanishing. The Coast Guard found his boat the next morning, drifting aimlessly. Pike was gone. The only thing left was his pair of industrial earmuffs, still hanging from the wheel. Inside one of the traps floated a single hand. Not his. News of Pike's disappearance didn't make national headlines. But the locals knew. They always knew. By mid-September, the fishermen started hearing whispers in the surf. "Come down," the sea would murmur. "Bring us the voice." Some left town entirely. Others nailed their windows shut and pretended the ocean didn't exist. But a few stayed, stubborn as barnacles, muttering prayers and drinking early. Every night, the same phenomenon, 11:11 p.m. The Blackwater light, long defunct, turned once, slow and deliberate, then froze pointing inland. People claimed to see figures walking through the fog after that. Women in soaked dresses, their eyes glowing like dying embers. Some knocked on doors, asking, "Where is the captain?" No one ever opened. In Boston, Dr. Rosenfeld received one last email from Ethan. Timestamp, 11:11 p.m. No subject. No text. Just a 45-second video attachment. It opened with the deck of a boat, filmed from a chest-mounted camera. Rain slanted sideways. Lightning flashed. Ethan's voice, distant but calm. "They keep saying the same thing. It's not over. They need direction. I think they want a captain again." The camera turned toward the wheel. A single hand gripped it, Ethan's left. His right arm ended at the elbow, wrapped in bandages soaked through with red. Then, faintly, from somewhere below deck, a hum rising. "Bring us home." The clip ended with a metallic clang, the sound of a hook tapping against steel. Dr. Rosenfeld called the Coast Guard. They found nothing. A week later, Blackwater Bay was declared unsafe for maritime activity. But that didn't stop the curious. YouTubers. Paranormal live streamers. Amateur ghost hunters. One of them, user Spectre Seekers 92, posted a video titled, "The Captain Lives." It showed a boat, unmistakably Mary's Lament, drifting near the lighthouse in heavy fog. At the bow stood a figure, male, tall, left hand on the wheel, right arm gleaming metallic silver. The head was tilted slightly down, as if listening. For a moment, the camera caught the face. It wasn't Jack Callahan. It wasn't quite Ethan, either. The video cut out mid-frame. When the uploader tried to delete it, YouTube returned a system error, "File in use." Locals started calling the sound that came at night the choir below. The bay itself began changing. Salt content rose. Fish stopped biting. Sonar scans failed beyond 20 feet. It was as if the ocean floor had turned into a mirror, reflecting signals back, but not quite the same. Divers who went down described it differently. They said there was no bottom anymore. Just darkness. And songs. October 31st. The fog was so thick it muffled even the church bells. At the rusty anchor, 5 old fishermen sat nursing their beers. No one spoke until the youngest broke the silence. "You all seen it too, right? That light last night?" The bartender didn't answer. He just pointed toward the window. Outside, barely visible through the condensation, the lighthouse beam turned, once, twice, then stopped. All 5 men froze. The jukebox flickered on by itself, playing an old sea shanty no one had picked. The lyrics warped, slowing down until they became unrecognizable. One man stood, trembling. "We should go. Right now." But the bartender was staring out the window. "Too late," he whispered. "They're coming inland." That night, a storm hit. Not wind and rain, just sound. Every boat siren, every buoy bell, every rusted chain on the pier began ringing in unison, creating a single, deafening harmony that rolled through town like thunder. Windows shattered. Dogs howled. And from the sea came the procession. Dozens of figures, half submerged, walking through the surf. Their dresses floated like torn veils. Each carried something, a rope, a net, a lantern glowing blue. At their head was a man steering an invisible wheel, his arm catching what little moonlight broke through the fog. Metal. Stainless steel. His voice echoed across the bay. "All debts return." The townsfolk watched from their porches, too afraid to breathe. When the procession reached the pier, the figures stopped. The man raised his hook toward the lighthouse. Its beam turned again for the first time in months. And then, impossibly, the fog receded, pulling back like a curtain, revealing the entire bay glowing from beneath. The water shimmered with shapes, boats, hundreds of them, suspended upside down just below the surface, their decks lined with motionless sailors. The widows began to sing. The melody was beautiful. Terrible. It wasn't human anymore. It was tidal. By dawn, the storm was gone. The water lay still. Blackwater Bay looked the same as always, gray, quiet, empty. But the lighthouse remained lit, its beam frozen inland at 11:11 a.m. No one saw the men with the hook again. Or the boy. A week later, a research trawler from Portland picked up a distress ping from near Devil's Teeth. They found no boat, no bodies, just a single anchor rope floating, tied in a perfect sailor's knot around a waterproof recorder. The recording contained 6 minutes of audio. Mostly static, then waves. Then a man's voice. "This is Captain Callahan, or what's left of him. If you're hearing this, don't come looking. The widows don't want the living anymore. They want witnesses." A pause. Water sloshing. Then, quietly. "Tell them the sea kept her word." Click. The rest of the tape was silence, until the last 30 seconds, when the same hum began again, joined by faint laughter. And finally, one sentence whispered through the static, in Ethan's voice. "The hand that steers is never truly gone." That winter, ice formed on the bay earlier than ever before. It cracked in patterns that looked like writing, long curves, intersecting spirals, a sigil no one recognized. People left. The post office shut down. The highway signs rusted. By spring, Blackwater Bay had a population of 12. Then 5. Then none. The last mailman to leave snapped a photo before driving out, the lighthouse glowing against the fog, and in the distance, a small boat moving in perfect circles, steering itself. He swore he could hear singing, faint but steady, following him up the road until the sound of the sea faded for good. 10 years later, Blackwater Bay was erased from most maps. The Maine Department of Transportation listed the region as inaccessible due to erosion, but locals in neighboring towns still called it by its nickname, the Drain. Nobody lived there now, at least, officially. But rumors stuck like salt on rust. Teenagers told stories of blue lights that appeared on foggy nights, coast radios catching a chorus of women humming in the static, and a lone boat seen from the highway circling endlessly beneath the dead lighthouse. That was what brought Tessa Vaughn there, a freelance documentary filmmaker with too many unpaid invoices and a fascination for places that shouldn't exist. She came with 2 crew members, Miles, her sound engineer, and June, the grad student who insisted on handling drone shots. Their goal was simple: record a feature called The Town That the Sea Ate. Tessa didn't believe in ghosts. But she believed in stories that bleed. They parked at the edge of the old highway where the sign still stood, half buried in sand. Welcome to Blackwater Bay, POP0. The fog rolled slow and low across the road, curling around their boots. It smelled not of salt, but something older, metallic, almost sweet. June adjusted her headset. Recording. Tessa faced the camera. Day 1. Blackwater Bay Expedition. Coordinates 43.06 north, 70.11 west. Objective: locate remains of the lighthouse, verify local claims of. The sound cut. Miles tapped the recorder. Dead battery. No, he said after a moment. Signal drop. Like something's jamming us. Tessa exhaled through her nose. Good start. They followed the shore path into town. Houses stood like rotting teeth in rows, windows boarded, roofs collapsed inward. Seaweed hung from street signs as if the tide had been there yesterday. Miles paused outside a bar, letters barely visible under corrosion, the rusty anchor. Want to set up inside? He asked. Perfect ambience, Tessa said. Get ambient sound. Creaking, wind, whatever's left. The door gave with a sigh. Inside, tables were appended, beer bottles embedded in floorboards like gravestones. A sign still hung above the bar, faded but legible. The sea doesn't take curiosity. It takes collateral. June filmed in silence. Her lens caught something on the counter, a rusted metal hook, polished only where fingers might have gripped it. Probably a prop, Tessa murmured, but her voice didn't sound sure. They set camp at the edge of the pier that night, stringing LED lanterns between the posts. The tide was low, the air sharp and wet. In the distance, the lighthouse stood like a broken tooth against the sky. Miles tested the hydrophones he'd brought. Just in case there's something under the surface, he said with a half-grin. Tessa rolled her eyes. Expecting to catch Nessie. He smirked. No, but sound travels weird in cold water. Could pick up old sonar echoes, metal resonance, even ship hulls from decades ago. He dropped the hydrophone. The speaker hissed, then settled into a low drone. June cocked her head. You hear that? Like a note. Miles adjusted levels. The pitch wavered just slightly off human tone. Then another joined it. Then 2 more. A harmony. Tessa leaned in. Could be currents through wreck metal. The voices synchronized. Not currents. Not echoes. Words. All debts return. Miles ripped the plug out. The speaker squealed, then fell silent. None of them spoke for a long time. At 2:15 a.m., June's drone activated on its own. It lifted from the ground, lights pulsing blue, and flew straight toward the bay. Miles shouted, "Controllers off." They ran after it, boots slapping against wet wood. The fog over the water was glowing. On Tessa's monitor, the live feed showed a ship, barely visible through mist, circling slowly. Deck light flickering. At the bow stood a figure. Coat soaked. Metal gleam at the wrist. The drone's mic crackled. A voice broke through. "You shouldn't have come." The feed cut to black. By morning, the drone was back on shore, battery dead, camera fused with salt crystals. Tessa reviewed what little footage remained. Frame 1172, fog, then water turning white like milk. Frame 1173, a hand pressing against the lens, skin translucent, eyes visible behind it like mirrors. Frame 1174, static. Miles packed their gear. Enough footage for an award. "Let's leave before we get our own episode." But Tessa couldn't move. Something about that voice, she knew it. She'd heard that tone in the archived Coast Guard tapes she downloaded weeks ago. Ethan Park. The boy who vanished. That night she snuck back alone with a flashlight and Miles's recorder. Fog hugged the dock like smoke. Each footstep sounded too loud, as if the wood was listening. When she reached the end, the sea was silent. Then a soft tapping rose from below. Clink. 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 She pointed the light down. A steel hook was tied to the post by a rope that disappeared into blackness. The recorder clicked on by itself. "Day 0, a man's voice said quietly. "Captain Callahan, log entry. The widows don't sleep anymore." They found their voice again. Tessa's throat tightened. "That can't be live," she whispered. But the voice continued. "If anyone finds this tape, don't turn the light on." From the lighthouse, as if on cue, a beam flickered to life, cutting through the fog straight at her. Frozen white. 11:11 p.m. Beneath her, the water started to boil. June and Miles found her at dawn, standing ankle-deep at the pier's edge, staring out to sea. The recorder lay in the sand, still running, capturing nothing but the sound of waves and a low, steady hum. Tessa didn't speak for 3 days after. When she finally did, her voice was not her own. It carried a strange echo, like two people speaking at once. She told them she had to go back. That the captain was waiting. They waited until night. Tessa said the sea was quieter then, as if it listened. Miles didn't want to go. June insisted they shouldn't split up again. But when Tessa started walking toward the pier with the camera on her shoulder and the steel hook tied to her belt, they followed, the way you follow a sleepwalker to make sure they don't fall off a cliff. The fog had returned, dense and white, swallowing the shore whole. Their flashlights reached only a few feet ahead, and every sound felt like it came from behind. The tide lapped slow against the wood. Each wave seemed to whisper something, a rhythm, a word, until it formed a sentence that neither of them wanted to understand. "Come steer." Tessa didn't hesitate. She untied the old motorboat they'd found earlier and stepped in. Miles grabbed her arm. "You're not seriously." "I have to," she said. Her pupils were blown wide. "He's calling." "Who?" June asked. Tessa looked out toward the black water. "The captain. And the boy. They're still out there." The motor coughed to life. Miles swore and jumped in after her. June followed. The boat cut through the fog like a ghost, each churn of the propeller echoing off invisible walls. The lighthouse light flashed once behind them. 11:10. When it turned again, the beam didn't reach them. It simply stopped, as if the fog itself had swallowed the light. Signal's gone, June muttered, staring at her phone. No GPS. No compass. Just keep filming, Tessa whispered. The camera caught nothing but gray until something shimmered beneath them, a faint blue spiral, slow and deliberate, like the eye of a storm seen from above. Then came the music. It started faint, humming through the hull, the same three-note motif the locals used to call the widow's call. The voices were not words this time. They were vibrations, harmonics that pressed against bone and lung. Miles winced, clapping his hands over his ears. Turn around. Tessa, turn around. But she was staring ahead, mouth moving in silent mimicry of the melody. The fog parted just enough to reveal Mary's lament. It drifted in a slow circle, ropes tangled, mast cracked. Its deck was covered in frost that gleamed blue. Tessa cut the engine. The boat glided alongside the derelict vessel and stopped. They climbed aboard. The smell hit first, old iron, salt, and something faintly sweet, like decayed flowers. Miles swung the camera around, breathing hard. "This is suicide," he whispered. June aimed her flashlight. "Wait, look." On the deck, carved into the wood with a blade, was a single sentence. "Bring us a witness." The letters were fresh. Wet. Tessa touched them, and the water on her fingertips began to glow faintly blue. The ship groaned. Something below deck was moving. "Back to the boat," Miles said. "Now." But Tessa was already walking toward the hatch. "If we don't go down, it'll follow us anyway." The voices grew louder, not outside anymore but inside their heads. "The sea remembers." The hold was half flooded, the water still and dark. Lanterns lined the walls, the same ghostly blue as the lanterns Ethan had filmed years ago. At the far end stood a figure. A man, tall, coat shredded by salt, steel gleaming where his right hand should have been. His eyes caught the light, gray, fog-colored. Tessa raised her camera. "Captain Callahan." The figure didn't move. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere. "You shouldn't have answered." Miles took a step back. "We're just." The tide takes what it's owed. From behind him, another figure emerged, younger, soaked, his left arm gone. Ethan Park. His mouth opened, and the same cord from the hydrophone came out, bending air and bone. June screamed. The light flickered. Water climbed their ankles. Callahan lifted his hook and pointed to the camera. "You brought the eye. That's enough." Tessa trembled but didn't lower the camera. "Why us?" Ethan turned his head slowly, like listening to something deep beneath. His voice was layered now, multiple voices, both male and female. "Because you watched. Because you believed after. That's all the sea ever needed, a story that keeps it alive." He raised his remaining hand. The water rose instantly, pulling at their legs, freezing cold. Miles dropped the mic. "Run." June turned, but the ladder backup was gone, replaced by solid hull. The boat moaned like an animal dying. Lanterns burst one by one, releasing tendrils of pale light that twisted into shapes, faces, arms, drifting hair. The widows filled the hold. They sang not in anger, but in grief. The sound shredded the air. Tessa fell to her knees, camera clutched to her chest, whispering through tears, "I'm sorry." Callahan's voice joined the song, quiet but certain. Now you understand. The sea doesn't drown us. It keeps us. When dawn came, the fog was gone. Coast Guard radar picked up a single vessel drifting near Blackwater Bay. They found June unconscious, wrapped in a life vest, mumbling nonsense about blue light and songs. Miles was missing. The only object recovered from the wreck was a camera, waterlogged, salt-eaten, yet somehow intact. Inside the memory card were exactly 666 video files. The last one lasted 11 minutes and 11 seconds. It began with Tessa's face in close-up, pale and shaking. She was on Mary's lament, water halfway up her chest. "If anyone finds this," she whispered, "don't come here. Don't listen to the recordings. They don't need you to believe in them. They just need you to hear." Behind her, the ocean began to glow. Ethan's silhouette appeared, half submerged, holding the broken anchor chain. Callahan stood beside him, his hook resting on the wheel. Both turned toward the camera. "The sea kept her promise," they said together. The last frame showed the lighthouse in full light for the first time in decades, the beam sweeping the shore one final time before collapsing into black. Then silence. The file ended. 2 years later, The Town That the Sea Ate premiered online as an unfinished documentary assembled from Tessa's recovered footage. It ended abruptly after the 11-minute clip, with the words, "In memory of those who went listening." Comment sections flooded with theories: AI hoax, viral marketing, digital ghost phenomenon. But a few viewers noticed something strange. If you paused the video at exactly 11:11, a reflection appeared behind Tessa, a row of faces staring into the lens. One of them looked like your own. To this day, sailors passing the coast of Maine claim to hear faint humming through the fog. Sometimes it's just the wind. Sometimes it isn't. And when the sea is calm, so calm that you can see your reflection perfectly, don't look too long. Because the reflection might not blink when you do. Clink. 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 End.